If you ask me which books I've read and reread the most, it would probably be this book right here, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've read this book about 3 times now, and that's really rare for me because I never read anything twice. Not a lot of people would say that this is Kazuo Ishiguro's best book. That would actually be Remains of the Day for many people. But for me, this is the best Kazuo Ishiguro book, not just because it's a textbook case of how to use sci-fi concepts to really explore an idea, or how it's one of his most subtle yet emotionally powerful books, but because it is one of the best books I've ever come across on love. Never Let Me Go is about 3 friends, Ruth, Tommy, and Kathy, who start off as students at a boarding school called Hailsham. Soon we find out that they are clones meant to donate organs for people. Some of them go on to become carers that look after the donors. Some of them go on to become donors right away. And the 3 kids, go off to spend time in the cottages after graduating from Hailsham, where the clones live out their young adulthood. So during all this time, as they're growing up, the 3 characters become involved in a love triangle with Ruth and Tommy as partners while Kathy watches. Unable to fulfill her feelings for Tommy, Ruth and Tommy eventually go on to become donors while Kathy goes on to become a carer. And this is a bit of a spoiler, but it won't, ruin the experience of the book. But after Ruth passes away, Tommy and Kathy become a couple. And in order to delay Tommy's donation and eventual completion, they seek this fabled deferral that is afforded to clones who show that they are truly in love. There's a lot that this book explores, including the whole idea of thesisship that is very prevalent in clone literature, meaning if you've recreated something exactly in its image, but with different components, is it the same thing? But to me, the biggest concept that this book explores is love. Yes, love is all over books, but usually love is treated in this very surface level fashion where people fall in love, fall out of love, or they choose love over career, that love is happiness or something like that. This is also why I have not gone back to romance novels after a few Nicholas Sparks or Daniel Steele. The setup and the characters and the plot lines may change, but the core mechanisms of romance novels are always similar. Rarely I've seen romance novels actually contemplate what love is to the point where it is literally broken down into its components. The closest I've seen is The Time Traveler's Wife. And I understand why people don't do this, because it's not sexy. It's not desirable to consider love like this. Love is something to be enjoyed, not studied. Like, would you read a scientific paper on what love is, or would you watch a 2-hour film where 2 attractive people are falling for each other? But I think Ishiguro does both at the same time in Never Let Me Go. He gives us a love story, but also gives us a study on love. So, what is love then, according to Ishiguro? When you are nothing to begin with, an empty shell, a clone, how do you express your identity? Ishiguro's answer is that who you are is how you love. For instance, the way Ruth and Tommy's relationship is inherently driven by fear. She is afraid of dying. She's afraid of losing Tommy. She is afraid that she's never had real love. As a result, she also has a very strenuous relationship with Kathy. It is through the way she loves others we see what kind of person she is, how she is so insecure. And it's not just with how she loves others. We see this also in how she loves, or in her case, hates herself. In page 166, Ruth goes, "Word modeled from trash, junkies, prostitutes, winos, tramps, convicts maybe, just so long as they aren't psychos. That's what we come from. We all know it, so why don't we all say it?" And this is very stark against how Kathy and Tommy love each other. They know it's doomed. They all have to die very early, but they choose to not only let themselves fall for each other, but they fight for each other. They persist, they believe, they hope. And because of that, we, the readers, hope with them that there is this way to defer their inevitable destruction. It is through their love that we understand what kind of people they are. Which brings me to the next important point. In the world of Never Let Me Go, there are various attempts made to prove that clones are human. One example is the gallery of the artwork that the children make. The other is Hailsham itself, where the teachers are essentially fighting to remind people that these clones deserve to be treated like human beings. But ultimately, Hailsham closes because all of their efforts to prove their humanity is meaningless against the dominant public opinion, which is that these clones are much more useful as organ donors. And by implication, that they should not be treated like human beings. But what does come through to the readers is the fact that these clones naturally choose to love. They form friendships, they form romantic attachments, or the way, as children, they craved attention from their guardians. On page 60, Kathy says, "Didn't we all dream from time to time about one guardian or other bending the rules and doing something special for us? A spontaneous hug, a secret letter, a gift." So the clones may have not convinced anyone in their world that they're humans, but to us readers, we feel it. We see that their actions are deeply human, that there is humanity within them. It doesn't matter whether there is evidence that they have souls or not. Their acts of love are evidence. The way that Kathy and Tommy desperately try to hold out for even a day longer with each other is evidence. And that brings me to my favorite part of Never Let Me Go's commentary on love. Kazuo Ishiguro intended Never Let Me Go as an allegory for the tragedy that is our existence. In an article named Future Imperfect in The Guardian, published in 2006, he talks about the moment when the final puzzle piece for the novel came into place while he was listening to an argument on biotechnology in the radio. He said, quote, "I could finally see the story I'd been looking for, something simple but very fundamental about the sadness of the human condition," end quote. The sadness of the human condition, as in the human condition where we are doomed to let go of people we love, of things we hold dear, and ultimately even ourselves. In essence, Ishiguro uses the clones as a metaphor for human life. In that same article, Ishiguro said, and I quote, "The boarding school setting, I might add, appealed to me because it struck me as a physical manifestation of the way all children are separated off from the adult world and are drip-fed little pieces of information about the world that awaits them, often with generous doses of deception, kindly meant or otherwise. In other words, it serves as a decent metaphor for childhood in general," end quote. So Hailsham, the boarding school, is our childhood. The cottages is young adulthood when we explore and experiment, but then comes real adulthood where we begin to deteriorate. Our body begins to break down, represented by the successive organ donations, and eventually we succumb, which is represented by the completion of the clones. For example, this is reflected in the way the teachers at Hailsham behave. Miss Lucy doesn't reveal to the students that they're clones because she wants to upend the system. It's because she loves the children, and she leans into that care to resist the fate that these children face. And this is much more evident when we see the dichotomy between Ruth and Kathy. Earlier I said that Ruth loved with fear while Kathy loved with hope. And the way they love leads to vastly different outcomes. Ruth does not believe that love can do anything for her. She accepts all the self-hatred she heaps on herself. But Kathy does believe that with love, there can be a future, a way to defy their impending doom. That's why they're so persistent on getting this deferral by proving that Kathy and Tommy are in love. And in their persistence, there is beauty that is not afforded to Ruth. Ishiguro once said in an interview, and I quote, "The people in Never Let Me Go believe irrationally, like we all believe, that love can do all kinds of things that make you exempt from your fate," end quote. And that is the message I think that rings so true with Never Let Me Go. Love makes you believe that you're exempt from your fate. Not that you are, but at least it makes your life so much fuller and much more graceful in that sense. Love is presented as this great weapon of choice we have against death. It is the antidote to what Ishiguro calls the sadness of the human condition. For Ishiguro's Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017, the Swedish Academy described him as a writer who, in novels of great emotional force, has uncovered the abyss beneath our illusory sense of connection with the world. This is perfectly reflected in the way he uncovers the way love behaves in Never Let Me Go. It is a work that is so subtle that I've heard it described as emotionally stunted, but it is exactly because of that we are able to see his truth about our world. It's not burdened by these overt expressions of emotion that usually blind us. And with expert literary skill, he allows his characters just enough feeling to open that slight window through which we can see that love binds us to this world and makes us feel real. It makes us who we are. It brings out our humanity, and it is what motivates us to fight against the struggle that is our short and painful existence on this earth. And to me, that is what Never Let Me Go is all about. Thanks for watching.